Hello everyone, and welcome. I am FLC, and we are counting down the top 4 teams in the Transatlantic Splatoon League Season 2 playoffs, and we're up to the second seed from Europe, Rift. So this set we're going to be taking a look at here is Rift versus Radiance. This was the set that determined the difference between second and third. This was a 9-game set where, of course, Rift did win 5-4. Of those 5 games, 4 of them were tower control. So, Rift is good at tower control. I think we can safely say that. But why is that? The reason is because they have a very, very high-risk, high-reward playstyle, which works out best in tower control. What you're going to see consistently from Rift is situations like what we see down here, where Rift is going to play to their mechanical ability, that is, their ability to hit shots, their ability to move, as much as they possibly can. And we see here, Skoze basically just walked into 2 people, but Urza is sufficiently cracked with the Rapid that he was able to clean up those fights, and in doing so, here's the situation: 1 special, 2 special, almost 3 special, and an L3D is going to have special in 2 seconds flat regardless because it's an L3D. This is how Rift plays. They will overextend intentionally into enemy turf. And if they manage to fight their way out of that overextension, what they will do is they will gain a resource advantage. Because where most teams would want to use 1 or 2 specials to take this part of the map, Rift has just brute forced it. They've just run in there and said, you know what, we hit shots better than you do, so we're just gonna take this part of the map off you, if you don't mind. A lot of teams do mind, of course, and they will quite often find themselves being rebuffed, but at the same time, if it ever works, we end up in a situation like this, where a single set of specials is going to get Rift all the way to here. That's the 17-point mark, and we're going to watch this play out. So remember, aside from an armor, up to this point, Rift has not used any specials. And of course neither has Radiance, but that's because they all kind of got splattered. This single pair of Inkjets is going to get Rift all the way, as we see here, to 17. This happens because by overextending and using mechanics to gain an advantage instead of using specials to gain an advantage, those specials are conserved, and then they can use those specials later, which means that those specials take them from, instead of 100 to 60, they take them from 60 to 20, which is what we see here. This is Rift's playstyle to a T. Every single game that they play looks like this, where everyone on Rift is going to just put themselves in positions, like we just see Skoze here taking a piece out of 4 people. Meanwhile, Urza comes in from behind and Alexei cleans up with the Stingray. This is Rift. This is what they do. This is all that they do. And on one hand, it's a double-edged strategy. It's a high-risk, high-reward strategy. When it works, they get pushes to 17, and we're going to see that yet again right here, where a single set of specials is once again going to carry them all the way from 100 to 17. However, of course, they do run out of steam pretty quickly, right? They're not really looking to gain control and hold on to it. What they're really doing is they're using one really strong push all at once with a single set of specials to get as deep into the enemy team's turf as possible. The other advantage of that, especially in tower control, is that in tower control there is a timer on how long it takes for the enemy team to get their own push started, and that timer is basically how long it takes for the tower to reset back to mid. So we see when the tower's at 17, the tower has to push from minus 83 all the way to 0 before Radiance can even start their push-up. So that means that all of this posturing up here, where they're using specials to try and push Rift off the high ground, it doesn't even mean anything because the tower isn't even scoring yet. And yes, they will stream in on defense and get themselves picked off over and over, but they have so much time that they've bought themselves because their push was so solid that it doesn't even matter that Urza's finding himself in the middle of nowhere. It doesn't even matter that Zekken dropped an armor just before. None of these things matter because they've already pushed to 17, and for Radiance to do the same thing, in the sensible, quote-unquote, way, they would need to blow several sets of specials to do so, and we see that exact thing happening here. All these specials are being thrown into this one part of the map, and even now, Rift is able to keep Radiance locked in at 54. This is why Rift is so good at tower control. Their playstyle suits tower control perfectly. There's all sorts of things that are going to keep happening here. Alexei just got caught by a splat bomb. Zekken is lost and has to super jump out. All these things don't matter though, because all that Rift needs to do is get one person to interrupt the tower, and everything that Radiance was working towards goes to waste. Rift skips all this, by the way, so Radiance is struggling to get through this part of the push. Meanwhile, we actually watched as Rift got this part of the map for free when they pushed. This is why Rift's pushes are so strong, is they can actually use specials, like their sort of first set of specials, to bust through the hard parts of the push, and keep the enemy team from even being able to defend those parts of the map. Meanwhile, Radiance is trying to do it the old-fashioned way. Now, another thing to consider here is, through all of this, you notice the map is kind of getting gradually more and more yellow. This is another thing that Rift is a little bit awkward. They struggle a little bit with painting. They do have an L3 and a Junior, but they don't really tend to paint the map all that much. Instead, what ends up happening is things like this, where they're going to walk out of their base and just immediately start fighting, and only use what turf they need to get into that fight in the first place, which means that gradually they do sort of get worn down a bit. But at the same time, yes, they're gradually getting worn down, but they've already pushed to 17, so yeah, great, we were losing for 4 minutes of that game, but that doesn't matter because we already won it. That is Rift's philosophy, almost, in a nutshell. To see even more of that, we're going to move on to Game 9 here on Schellendorf Institute. Again, and this time we're going to sort of see it in reverse, where Rift is going to start out basically getting battered for the entire 5 minutes that this game lasts, and then they make one overtime push that ends up sealing it. The thing with this game, and the thing with tower control especially, is that these objectives are what we call high watermark objectives, which means that your single best push is what the game cares about. It doesn't matter if you're in control of the game for 5 minutes straight, if you don't actually end up getting enough points to win the game out of that 5 minutes of control. Rift only needs a single 1 minute push on tower control, if that, to get a decisive lead. Meanwhile, Radiance is going to control this game so decisively and for so long that I'm actually going to speed this up, because we're just going to watch the same thing over and over again, where they're going to take these piecemeal defenders out very easily, but Rift is always going to find a way to just clutch the defense, just barely. And sure, you could absolutely argue that Rift is sort of making these awkward situations themselves, where if they would only defend normally, they could prevent the scoreline from even reaching this stage. But part of the reason why Rift is so effective in these sort of, as we see this exact thing here, where Zekken sort of steals the tower while everyone else has been splattered, you could definitely argue, and I would completely agree with you, that Rift should probably be defending a little bit more, with a bit more discipline. But at the same time, part of what makes them so effective on their pushes, and part of what makes this double-edged, highly aggressive, high-risk, high-reward playstyle work for them, is their complete and utter disregard for the usual conventions of controlling the map gradually. They don't care about this. I mean, look at their base. Look at their base. They just got finished defending, and they don't care. They're standing on the tower with half of their base still yellow, right? This is how Rift plays. This is what they do. Like, Skoze's going to walk into a 3v1 and actually almost win it. That's what he does. That's what Urza does. And all that Rift needs to do in order to make these pushes work is to have the stars align and have Urza and Skoze basically push in at the same time in the same place, so that the enemy team has to deal with two players who can win 3v1s. And, I mean, it might sort of seem as though I'm characterizing Rift as a team who sort of shoots first and asks questions later. because they are. But at the same time, it works for them. They're second place in Europe, and they are very, very dangerous. Yes, you could definitely, like, if they're fighting Starburst, I would absolutely expect Starburst to win in the semi-finals. However, they are so dangerous on their pushes, and they are so willing to take these risks and just throw their aim at you and just say, we are better, that it doesn't even matter what kind of strategies you have concocted to deal with their aggression, because sometimes they're just going to ignore the fact that you have the better way of playing, and they're just going to win the game anyway, and that's basically what happens in this game here. We see with only a minute remaining, Radiance is actually, again, making a deep push into Rift's base, and they're actually going to get all the way to 5. They would knock out here if not for the fact that Skoze happens to clean up, right? And now, actually, Rift catching Grey here is kind of a big deal too. And now we see, like I said before, this is sort of where the stars align a little bit, and we're going to have Skoze and Urza in the same place at the same time, and the magic starts to happen. So at this point, we've got 30 seconds remaining, and we're going to lose the tower. So this push, I'm going to pause when we get to the 0-second mark. Actually, I'm going to pause now, because this is more or less where the push actually starts, is right here. So this is where the push starts for Rift. The entire map is yellow up to this point. They have one person on the tower, one person in their base stingraying, and they have Skoze about to jump in. Urza's on the respawn, and Obito is sitting here nice and ready to just roll up and take Zakken off the tower and win the game. But watch what happens. So Obito is not able to deal with Skoze. Skoze just throws his aim at Obito, and Obito can't handle it. And now Skoze and Urza are sitting here ready to go. Kiva gets stalled out on the flank. Skoze just appears in the base and one-shots Obito with an Inkjet. And meanwhile, all of this sort of hasty defense from Radiance just ends up in a giant mess, which Rift just says, that's what we want. That's what we're going to win with. So that's Rift. They are the double-edged team. They use 2 Inkjets, and their double Inkjets are a double-edged strategy that has got them to second place in Europe, and who knows, maybe even further than the semis in the playoffs. But we'll have to see. That's going to all take place on the 9th of January. And until then, all we can do is speculate. Speaking of speculation, the next video will be covering Freeze, so look forward to that. And I'll see you next time.